It's one thing to learn about history from scholars and researchers. It's something else to hear about it from somebody who was there. Coming up, the amazing story of World War II hero Adred Lenoir. He's the last living survivor of the Samuel B. Roberts DE-413. It was an escort destroyer that was outmatched in every way against the Japanese in the Battle off Samar. The story of the Roberts crew represents an amazing feat of courage and survival. We'll get Lenoir's first-hand account via Zoom from his home in Alabama. I'll also talk with one of Lenoir's greatest admirers, Kansas naval veteran Tom Zwemke. Zwemke served during the Vietnam War on the ship that was named after Lenoir's ill-fated DE-413. He helps tell the amazing story of this last heroic sailor and his shipmates who went down in this historic battle in the South Pacific. Please join us right now for a special edition of One-on-One. Tom Zwemke is a Wichita area Navy veteran of the Vietnam conflict. He served aboard the USS Samuel B. Roberts DD-823, and that was the Navy destroyer that carried on the Roberts name after the sinking of the DE-413 during the Battle off Samar in World War II. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Victor, always a pleasure.
I have used these words DD and DE, or these initials, and we will be using them more during this conversation.
Right.
So please help our audience understand what the differences are between the DD and the DE.
Well, Victor, primarily in size, a destroyer escort is smaller than a destroyer. Typically during World War II, like the Roberts, which was a Butler-class destroyer escort, is a little over 300 feet long, whereas the ship I was on was 390 feet. Heavier, more tonnage, more firepower. The 413 had 5-inch 38s, but with a single barrel. The ship I was on were twin 5-inch 38s, and both ships had torpedo capabilities, and both were able to conduct anti-submarine warfare as well, and shore bombardment. The Roberts DE-413 was engaged during the battle off Samar in escorting 6 carriers, which were known as CVEs. They were a smaller carrier, escort carrier, that were, during the battle off Samar mission, were to support General Douglas MacArthur's return to the island of Leyte.
Okay. So that we hope now that our audience understands the differences between the two. We're here to talk about and for you to help us reflect upon this outstanding naval military personnel, and he is Adred Lenoir. Tell us about the significance of Adrian's story and the DE-413's involvement in the Battle off Samar.
Well, Adred is an inspiration to all generations, his generation, my generation, younger generations. Adred is at the young age of 97, and in my opinion, and in many opinions around the world, hold him in the highest regard as a true American war hero.
Got out of boot camp in Sampson, New York. They assigned me to a DE-413 and sent me to Norfolk till the ship was completed in Houston, Texas. I didn't go to any kind of school. I went directly from boot camp on a board ship.
It is a true David versus Goliath story. A fleet that the Imperial Japanese Navy had was commanded by Vice Admiral Kurita. This was a total surprise. Admiral Halsey had moved the Third Fleet out of that area, foiled by a Japanese decoy of several carriers and support ships. And so the Gulf of Leyte was left to these task units, and on the morning of the 25th, here comes 23 of the world's largest battleships, heavy cruisers, and destroyers from the Imperial Japanese Navy. So Adred wakes up that morning, goes to chow, and then it was reported that they saw ships in the distance off to the northwest headed their way. Shortly thereafter, shells started raining down around them and around the escort carriers. Taffy 3 was composed of 6 escort carriers and 7 what we call small boys, destroyer types. 3 Fletcher-class destroyers, the Johnston,
Bull, and Heermann.
4 destroyer escorts, the Roberts, Dennis, Raymond, and Butler.
Turned out that it was they had 20 some odd ships, and their smallest gun was as larger than the one that we had. We had 5-inch gun and only 2 of those. And they were the largest we had, and the largest they had was an 18-inch gun. But we was not hit by that, but we did get hit with some, they said 8-inch guns. And when they kept coming closer, they could, and we was trying to do everything that possible to keep them away till the carriers got away or got more planes in the air. But when we started into battle, the captain announced over the speaker that what we were doing, that we was outnumbered and that the chance of survival was none.
Admiral Sprague still thought that William Halsey's Third Fleet was protecting the entire area and was not aware that he had departed the theater, leaving his task unit and 2 others by themselves. The Imperial Japanese Navy pursued south. Admiral Sprague ordered an immediate 090 turn east with the carriers, and that the 4 destroyer escorts and 3 destroyers produce a smoke screen. And so the Japanese Navy would be covered by smoke.
And like I say, their smallest ship was larger than the ship that the DE that I was on.
There were many heroes that day, and one of those big heroes was Commander Ernest Evans, who won the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was the skipper of the USS Johnston, the Fletcher-class destroyer, who did an immediate about face, went through the smoke screen, and attacked the Japanese Navy head-on. Hits some cruisers, then turns around and heads back into the smoke screen. Admiral Sprague gives the order, small boys, attack, whereupon the
Bull, and Heermann,
which were 2 Fletcher-class destroyers, do the same thing as the Johnston. The Samuel B. Roberts, DE-413, follows the
Heermann
into battle. The Roberts came across the heavy cruiser Chokai, launched its 3 torpedoes, of which 1 hit the stern, and the Chokai fell back out of formation and later sank during that battle. It immediately did an about face, headed back through the smoke screen to protect the 6 escort carriers. to run across another Japanese heavy cruiser, which was known as the Chikama. And that heavy cruiser was raking the
Escort carrier Gambier Bay
with 8-inch guns. And here comes the Little Roberts, 300 feet of her, alongside this huge, over 600-foot long, heavy Japanese cruiser, and opens fire with over
600 rounds
of 5-inch .38 in 35 minutes. It couldn't penetrate the hull of the ship, but it could rate the superstructure and cause great damage, which that ship later on sank. So by then, the Japanese Navy had zeroed in on the Little Sammy B and in time sank it, primarily from rounds
from the battle cruiser
Congo. Adred Lenoir, his battle station was in Repair Party 1 aboard the 413. And his job assignment, along with others in his group, were to keep things working, generators and other necessary equipment to keep the 413 in the fight. So, at the point where the Roberts goes dead in the water from a big 50-foot hole in the port quarter of the ship aft, he emerges from the starboard side or the right-hand side of the 413, and his job was to go aft to fix, along with his repair party, a 40 millimeter gun, which was just forward of Mount 52, which was the aft 5-inch .38 mount. By then, fire, shells, things were exploding around him. He was hit with shrapnel to his legs and still bears the scars of that today. So by then, Captain Copeland had issued abandon ship. Adred left the ship from about midships on the starboard side with a lot of other crew, swam away from the Roberts as it sank by the fantail and went down by the stern. Now, what you have then is absolute chaos. You can only imagine what was going on the surface and above you.
We was in the water and the sharks was all around us. My two best friends didn't either one make it. They were both killed instantly. And at the battle station where they were at, we were in a different location on the ship, and I happened to be where a shell didn't hit. But my two best friends went down with the ship. The outcome was that the Japanese turned and retreated. They thought they were running low on fuel, and they thought that the aircraft carriers was the large aircraft carriers, and thought the destroyers and the destroyer escorts was cruisers and destroyers. That the plane they sent out for observation reported the wrong thing, and they had already won the battle. All they had to do was to just go on into Manila. But they got the wrong information and left.
They were in the water over 50 hours, over 2 days, fending off sharks, watching their shipmates, some of them, die in the water, killed by sharks, or die of their wounds, covered in oil. Finally, on the third day, they were rescued. And Adred went to a hospital ship, then to New Guinea, recovered, returned to the States and to San Francisco Christmas of 1944. He then had 39 days of leave where he returned to his hometown where he was born and raised,
Jemison, Alabama.
After his leave, he returns to San Francisco and has a year left and returns to the Philippines in terms of repairing ships. So Adred not only survived a major naval battle, but got back into the fight and was discharged in January of 1946, goes back home, works in a department store, and then became a mail carrier for 36 years. Adred is typical of the greatest generation in that they did their part to win World War II. They came home, they went back to civilian life, and they enjoyed the rest of their lives, raised families, and carried on.
What happened to the other survivors from the DE-413 after World War II?
Well, that's very interesting, Victor. When I left the Navy in 1967, I came home and I kind of forgot about my Navy service. The Vietnam period, it was somewhat of a, as you know, a very interesting period of time, and concentrated on going to school and carrying on. It wasn't until, I would say, the early 1990s that I started thinking about my Navy career and how much it meant to me. So I contacted some of the shipmates from the 413, in that we had a relationship that I served on a Samuel B. Roberts, the second one, and we started a conversation. Whereupon they invited me to a reunion, October of 1991, to meet some of the 413 shipmates. And I have to say, Victor, it was probably one of the most exciting, memorable reunions that I ever enjoyed. They really welcomed myself and others from the 823 and made us feel at home, told us many stories and what happened to them. A lot of these survivors from the 413 went on and enjoyed incredible careers in all kinds of business and commerce. And during that reunion, we celebrated two things that were very historic in the history of DE 413. We held a memorial service in Newport, Rhode Island at the Navy base on board the 3rd Roberts and crew members from all three ships, the first and only time to remember all of those souls lost on all three ships. The second thing was at the Navy War College at the Navy base in Newport. They unveiled for the first time the Bureau ship's model of the DE 413, and when they rolled that model in on a display case, you instantly saw the survivors from that battle from the Sammy B go to that model, and they went from 50 and 60-year-old to 18 and 19-year-olds, and the excitement and the looks on their faces, everybody just backed away, gave them room, and all of them pointed out exactly where they were, what their duty stations were, where they were during that battle, and when the ship went down. You could have heard a pin drop only from the standpoint that you gave them their space to honor their courage and sacrifice during such a historic naval battle as the Battle off Samar.
Is Adred the only survivor today?
Yes, he is. After all these years, Adred is celebrated as the last survivor of DE 413. He has been a role model, not only for the greatest generation, a survivor in a major battle, but he is teaching young generations the value of sacrifice, the value of giving one's service to their country. He has been honored by admirals, commanders of ships, enlisted men, and also a letter from the President of the United States at the time, President Trump. he continues to demonstrate as a supreme role model, a humble, courageous tin can sailor, and he's very proud of his service. He is extremely well taken care of. There is a young lady
by the name of Gianetta Jones,
who lives in Clapton, Alabama, who looks after, and Adred lives with them, and she takes care of his well-being. So he's very lucky to have people around him that look after his welfare.
You use the words tin can sailor.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, that means a lot of things, Victor. To put it in the words of Adred Lenoir, the definition of a tin can sailor is a member of a special group. A group of, at that time for me, sailors that always were on the front line of any action, fun-loving, you might say. There are stories, there's legends, and always had each other's back, sacrificed a lot, but enjoyed life when they could. I would have to say that there's a major organization called DES Vets, Destroyer Veterans, that was formed in the mid-1970s in Somerset, Massachusetts. It's called the Tin Can Sailors Association, and which I'm a member of. And we have reunions. We have reunions every year. So that reunion, going back to October of 1991, attending the 413 reunion, the 823 did not have an association at that time, and the survivors from 413 gave us the encouragement to form our own organization, which we did later on in the mid-1990s, and have met every 2 years somewhere in the United States, where we all go have fun and recount all the memories of our service aboard the 823, and remember all of those that served on the 413 and FFG 58. We have a website called the Samuel B. Roberts Shipmates Association, and it provides a lot of information, a roster of members and other activities, and our current president and past president since the association was formed in the mid-1990s. We have a great bunch of leaders. We have a great bunch of people that really care about the memory of being a tin can sailor and being a tin can sailor aboard the Sammy B 823.
Is Adred a member of that tin can sailor club?
He is the last member, and as a matter of fact, he is showcased on the DE 413 Survivors Association as the last remaining member, holding up this request for 97 birthday cards last November, in which he received about 700 from all over the world. And 2 years prior, he also sent out a request and received hundreds. So to date, Adred Lenoir has received over 1,200 birthday cards and greetings from folks from all over the country. A lot of school children from all over, especially in Texas, have written him cards, hold him in high esteem. And here you have this living example that survived a major naval battle, carrying on, and his legacy is inspiration for all generations. And I think probably will be for a long time to come.
Enjoy living in the United States and supporting the country and being respectable people.
If Samuel Booker Roberts Jr. was looking down from above and viewed the 3 ships so named for him, he would be very proud and say, "Well done, Sammy B. shipmates, well done. No higher honor."
Tom Zwemke, Navy veteran, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this interesting story and sharing your views about it.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for watching this edition of One on One. Our email address is oneonone@kpts.org, and that is if you have any questions or comments. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.